Hello candidates, welcome once again to our today's financial accounting lesson. The topic is Introduction to Public Sector Accounting. In our last lesson, we started on the subtopic Regulatory Structures and Oversight, and the first structure we covered is the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. In our today's lesson, we are going to tackle the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board, which is the Kenyan version. All right, the Kenyan version. The previous one was the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. Today we want to consider the board that was put in place by the Act of 2012, the Public Financial Management Act. So, candidates, let us look at the Kenyan version of Public Sector Accounting Standards. The topic is Introduction to Public Sector Accounting. The subtopic is Regulatory Structures and Oversight. So we are yet to get the oversight. We are still on the structures. Regulatory structures. The topic is Introduction to Public Sector Accounting. I've just mentioned that today we will consider the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. Okay, Public Accounting Standards Board. This is the abbreviation of the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. It is a board, all right, a board. So by the end of this lesson, candidates should be able to explain or highlight the establishment, be able to explain the establishment of this board, the mandate, and the functions. And the functions of PSASB, the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. Now, this board, the PSASB board was established and instituted in accordance to sections 192, section 192 and 193 and 193 of the Public Financial management, Public Financial Management Act. Okay, Act is an act of Parliament of the year 2012. Parliament enacted this act in 2012, and is on the basis of this act, right, that the PSASB was formed. Remember, we are discussing the establishment, the mandate, and functions of regulatory structures in the public sector. One regulatory structure is the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. So this act, do I need to mention the Gazette notice? Do I need to mention the Gazette notice, or let me just mention it? The act through, let me say, through a Gazette notice, Gazette notice number. Okay, let me just have the number 1199, number 1199. All right, and it was on the date of 28th of August 2014. 28th of August 2014. The act was put in place in 2012, but the board was established in 2014 through a Gazette notice that was issued, the Gazette notice number 1199, 1199, that was issued on 28th of August 2014. Okay, so I'll not be surprised if you do not know anything about it, because in 2014 these were the emerging issues in accounting. It is no longer emerging because this board has been established and instituted. That's why in your syllabus there is the last topic there, emerging issues. It's no longer emerging, it has already emerged, and we have the act in place. From 2014, we have the board, Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. So that is the establishment. It is established on the basis of the Public Financial Management Act. So candidates, at the cabinet level, this board is represented by the Cabinet Secretary to the National Treasury. At the cabinet level, the board is represented by none other than the cabinet secretary to the National Treasury. The cabinet secretary to the National Treasury is the representative of the board at the cabinet level. So that is the establishment. Now let's discuss briefly the mandate. Now the mandate of the PSASB, the mandate of the PSASB, and the functions are established in part 4 of sections. This is part 4, let me say, part 4 of the Public Financial Management Act, sections 192 to section 195. So let's have the mandate. What's the mandate? The mandate of this board, number one is set generally accepted accounting and financial standards for public sector entities. That is the first mandate, to set generally accepted and financial standards for public sector entities. The second mandate is to prescribe and pronounce generally accepted internal audit standards. That is the second mandate of this board. Then the third mandate is mainstreaming, let me say, mainstreaming of best practices, for good governance, internal controls and risk management, okay, and risk management in the public sector. Risk management in the public sector. To set generally accepted accounting and financial standards for public sector entities. Number 2, prescribe and pronounce generally accepted internal audit standards and mainstreaming or benchmarking in the best practices for good governance, internal controls and risk management in the public sector. So candidates, this means that in setting these standards, the board, this Kenyan board, has to take into consideration international best practices in public sector accounting standards. Has to take into consideration, okay? It has to benchmark on the international best practices for good governance, internal controls and risk management in the public sector. So this is the mandate of Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. Now let's discuss the functions. The functions of this board. Functions of Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. This board that was formed by the Public Financial Management Act of 2012. Function number one, the first function is one, set generally accepted accounting and financial standards. The second function is to prescribe minimum standards of maintenance of proper books of accounts for all the entities in the public sector. Proper books of accounts for all public sector entities. Books of accounts for all public sector entities. The third function, number 3, is to prescribe internal audit procedures which comply with the Public Financial Management Act. Right, which comply with the Public Financial Management Act. Then the third function of this board, the fourth function of this board, is to prescribe formats for financial statements, and reporting, financial statements and reporting, by all state organs, all the organs of the state and public entities. That is function number 4. Function number 5, candidate, is to publish and publicize the accounting and financial standards and any prescribed guidelines, guidelines and directions prescribed by the board. Publish and publicize. Number 6. The sixth function is to do what? It is to gazette the dates of application of the standards. Okay, but that has to be done in consultation with the cabinet secretary. So I can write, can say, in consultation with the cabinet secretary, with the cabinet secretary on the effective dates for implementation of standards, comma, gazette the dates for application of standards and guidelines. This has to be done in consultation with the cabinet secretary. Then there is another function, candidates. Function number 7, to monitor. Here is implementation. She is following a certain order. Gazette, this is prescribing, coming up with the standards. All right. Then we're talking about implementation of the standards and guidelines. Here we are talking of monitoring. To monitor, number 7. To monitor the adherence. To monitor the adherence to the standards by all the state organs and public sector entities Then we will put down the last function. This is function number 8, the last function of the PSASB. Number 8 is to promote transparency and other constitutional values and other constitutional values and principles values in effective, prudent, effective principles in efficient and prudent management of revenues expenditures, liabilities, and assets, and assets of the state organs and all the public sector entities. That is the 8 functions of the public sector accounting standards. So candidates, that will mark the end of our today's lesson. Remember, the objective of the lesson was that by the end of this lesson, you, the learner, should be able to explain the establishment, the mandate, and the functions of the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. That was the objective of our today's lesson, and it is my hope that I have done my part. The ball is now in your court to ensure that we internalize what we've been learning today so that you are able to understand the public sector accounting. This is just but an introduction to public sector accounting. What we learned here is very important. We've done the second structure, regulatory structure. Okay? We've looked at a body, regulatory body, which is the board that has been formed by an act of parliament. That is the Public Financial Management Act. We've looked at the mandate and the functions of this board. So I'll stop there for today. We continue to learn more about public sector accounting in our subsequent lessons. For now, I say bye-bye.
Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to get yourself a copy of our professionally prepared study text and revision partners.